You are listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. I'm Elena Paweta, Executive Communication Coach and TEDx organizer. With each episode, I'll share with you communication tips and ideas from top business leaders to help you excel in your career. Welcome to the next episode of Ideas and Leaders podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Laura Jackson. She's a music director and conductor of the Reno Philharmonic Orchestra in Nevada. And I had a pleasure to participate in Laura's workshop 2 months ago. And it was one of the best workshops that I attended on leadership. That's why I immediately decided to invite her so that she can share her perspective on leadership on our podcast. Hi, Laura. It's great to have you here.
Hello there. Thank you so much. This is a delight and an honor. I look forward to the conversation.
So, Laura, your workshop on leadership that I attended in Reno was amazing. And I hope to ask you a little bit more about it. But before that, can you tell us about your story? How did you get to become a music director and a conductor? What led you to this?
Yes. Well, I came to conducting gradually. When I was a young child, I fell in love with the violin. And it was in public school that I was handed a violin for the first time and was so lucky to have a teacher that taught me lessons in a little orchestra that I played in. And in that, I found my voice. I found a real passion, a way that I could explore the world and explore my own, sort of personality that way and expressiveness. So I studied violin through elementary school and middle school, and I started to have these big dreams of playing in Carnegie Hall and being a professional violinist. And as I went on, I was exploring, orchestra and chorus and singing in musicals as well as playing the violin. And I just grew this kind of love for so many different aspects of music. And when I got to college, studying music performance at Indiana University, I found that I would be sitting in orchestra and would be so spellbound by the way the woodwind sounded or by how the timpani would transform the energy and the momentum of a piece, how one cymbal crash would be like the perfect topping on a dessert. It was just magical to see how all of these pieces come together to create something so beautiful. And that was when I started studying scores and looking more holistically at the participatory music experience. So from that, I gradually started conducting first young kids in an amateur orchestra while I was still playing professionally in orchestras all over New England and Boston. And gradually decided that I really wanted to focus on conducting. And I went back to school and I went back to do a master's and a doctorate. It was genuinely the scariest thing I've ever done because I spent 12 years developing all of these professional contacts in Boston. And I just up and left all of it to do something even more risky and more competitive with no guarantee. And here I was in my mid-30s. It was really a very impractical thing to do. And I think when I told my parents I was doing this, I think they were probably quietly horrified. But luckily, I have been very fortunate to have wonderful opportunities. After I did my work at the University of Michigan, I was lucky enough to become the first woman to be the assistant conductor of the Atlanta Symphony. And that was a national enough, visible kind of appointment that it generated a lot of guest conducting. And from that platform, I was able to gain my way into, finals of auditions. And a few years after my time in Atlanta, I won the music directorship of Reno Phil, which I am so grateful to still have today.
Wow, what an amazing journey. Yeah, congratulations that you decided to make this step, this courageous step. And I think that it is always about those small steps and small decisions that we make in certain situations that lead us to where we are right now, right?
Yes, that is so true. But there's another element of my story that I didn't actually include in that version, but it was a very real part of my journey, which was injury. And I think that, when we look at a life journey and we look at the direction that a career can take, that can often include, if not always, the unexpected. And for me, that was tendonitis, arm injuries that resulted from overuse and tension in my technique as a violinist. Many people don't realize that playing an instrument is very athletic because it's athletic for very specific small muscles. But for a violinist studying to be a professional, you're practicing 8 hours in a day, 6 to 8 hours every single day. Sometimes you're doing rehearsals, 3 rehearsals back to back in a day. So, you can't always put the instrument down when you're tired or feeling some tension or pain. And so it can result in real injuries, which it did for me. So, although I went to school as a violinist and then I was out freelancing in Boston for 12 years and I had great musical experiences. A lot of that time I was in pain and I was seeking medical help for those issues. And it was through that experience when I was unable to play the violin that I actually had the first opportunity to sit and listen to orchestras from the outside. And also the other experience I had was singing in a choir for choral conductors that were learning their craft. So then I was like a guinea pig. I was part of the ensemble that conductors would work on, and I watched them being coached by their professors. This was at Indiana University. And that was fascinating to me because I realized how much gesture from a conductor or one comment, if you know how to tweak an inner voice, for instance, you can transform the communication, the sense of emotion that is portrayed by a piece of music. So that was my first window into the power of conducting. And I think had I not been injured, I would not have taken the steps that led me to that awareness. And I may not have known that that was my true path. I eventually did get back to playing, and I, had many wonderful years of playing. So becoming a conductor was a real choice. But I think that what I learned from that part of my journey is to be adaptable and flexible and to be open to reading what's happening around you and trusting yourself to try something in a new way, to take a risk, to be curious, to see yourself in a new light if your life journey is taking you there.
Yes, it's definitely. We never know where those small incidents will lead us and how our life can be changed. So as you changed your life and became and stepped into this more leadership role and more as you started seeing everything more holistically and you stepped into the conductor role. So what challenges did you see as a leader when you started your journey, especially as a woman conductor, as you said that there were not so many women conductors before? So can you describe what challenges you faced and also how did you manage those challenges?
Yes. So, the first thing that I experienced the first time I conducted was how fascinating it was to be able to manipulate all these different voices and ask people for things and collaborate and draw wonderful music out of people. And that was all the positive part. What comes soon after that is the awareness of the courage that it takes. When you step onto the podium, you have nothing in your hand but a stick. You are not able to make any sound yourself musically. You need to inspire other people in order to make the sound you're looking for. So a lot of being a conductor is about gaining the trust of your orchestra or your ensemble and motivating them to give their very best, to sometimes play beyond what they think they're capable of. So a lot of it is the psychology of interaction. For me, my own nature, my own sort of personality, I always struggled for confidence and still do in many ways. I did not find it easy to step up on a podium and feel like I truly belonged there. So that was an enormous challenge for me to believe that I had ideas worth listening to and that I had the skills and the ear to pull things together that would be wonderful for an audience to listen to. So I was often finding my way through a lot of fear, a lot of nervousness. And often I thought, I wonder if that means I'm not really good because I'm always nervous. And this is after years of being a professional. And then one day it sort of clicked that I'm nervous because I really care. And I'm nervous that maybe I'll fall short of bringing everything that I have to making this work. And then I had a wonderful, wonderful mentor, Benjamin Zander, who's a great, great leader. He's a great thinker on empowerment and leadership and also on making music. And I actually played for him. I took a lesson with him and I went in there with a pianist and I played the Franck Sonata on my violin. And I was terrified because he was this big, huge conductor personality in Boston. And he stopped me and he said, Laura, all I hear is you worrying. That's the only thing I'm hearing. And he said, I want to hear your heart. I want to hear this music. I want to hear everything else except your worry. And that was a pivotal moment for me because then I realized that the secret for me was to focus beyond myself entirely, to focus on the miracle of the music that I was bringing and sharing with people. And as long as I focused on that, I had enough enthusiasm to trust myself out there on the podium. And that still helps me now. When I am deeply nervous before a concert or a rehearsal, or I'm conducting a great, great orchestra, whatever it is, then I think to myself, the joy that it brings me to make music, the joy to do what I do. And what always helps me backstage is to think, how many more moments will I have in my lifetime to do this that I love so much? How many times will I conduct this Beethoven symphony? I may never have the opportunity to conduct the piece that I'm about to conduct. Who knows? So I'm going to make the most of this experience now, the next 30 minutes, the next 2-hour concert, because I don't know when I'm going to cross this path again of these wonderful pieces. And I know that they are magical enough and special enough that I want to experience them fully and I want to share them fully. And that's what propels me every single time to get past my own fear. The other thing that you asked about is being a woman. And that is a huge factor for me. I am now in my 50s. I started conducting when I was, in my early 20s. And at that point, there were very, very few conductors that were women. You would see them in schools, in elementary and middle and high schools. You would see a few at the collegiate level, a handful here and there. But then at the professional level, there was only like 4 or 5 of us. Basically, everywhere I've gone, almost everywhere, I have been the first woman on the podium there. That's incredible to say.
Oh, wow.
But it really is true. The vast majority of my guest conducting experiences have been, that I've been the first woman they've had. So, it's a great honor to be a path breaker. It's also incredibly stressful because you do feel that if you make one mistake, then everybody will attribute it to your gender and not to a bad day or whatever. You're scrutinized to every single detail, down to what you wear walking out, So that was definitely incredibly stressful. And I certainly felt that I had to be way more than perfect. I had to work twice as hard, know things twice as well, rehearse that much better than anybody else in order to just have opportunities at all. And I think that that was true. I think that I did. And I'm glad that I worked that hard. I'm not sure I would be where I am now and have the opportunities I have now. We are still in a world where women have glass ceilings in the field of conducting. There is not the highest level of major orchestra in the United States has not yet hired a woman as a music director. They now bring them in occasionally as guest conductors, but it's still a fairly rare occurrence, and they have never had a woman at the helm as a leader shaping the artistry and future of that institution. That's a big thing to give someone, and they have yet to do that. So I really hope that in my lifetime, I will witness that. And I am pleased to say that there are many women now conducting at the professional level, and there are many more orchestras bringing in guest conductors. So that's wonderful to see, whereas for 30 years of my career, I knew everybody, every other woman that was conducting at the same level. There were only a few of us. Now there are women that I have never met and never seen on the podium, and that's incredibly exciting. And, you hear of searches for a new music director where there's more than one woman in the search. And then you start to think, well, this is wonderful. Maybe it's beyond checking the box of a diversity, I need to have my female candidate, and that it's actually something artistically that the institution is looking for. I've had numerous challenges along the way, but I will also pay tribute to my predecessors. And I was not the first to do this. Maren Alsop, Joanne Falletta, Sarah Caldwell, and many others preceded me. So I stand, their shoulders, and they dealt with many things with great courage and expertise that have allowed me to be where I am and do what I do.
Yes, it is an amazing journey that you had, definitely. And it is also very inspiring to hear that Benjamin Zander was your mentor, because I love his TED Talk. It is one of my favorite TED Talks. We could see his energy and how inspiring he is, even through this very short film on a TED platform. So, Laura, you mentioned that when you start as a leader, you have to gain trust of your team, of an orchestra, right? So we have a lot of business professionals who are listening to us, so I'm sure that they can find a lot of inspiration and analogies in what you are saying. So what would you recommend? How can we actually gain trust of a team, especially if we're working with a team that we did not work with before? How can we gain their trust? How can we motivate them? What is your recommendation?
For me, I've found that treating people with genuine respect for what they are capable of, for what they bring to the task at hand, goes such a long way. And also, when people feel like you are really seeing them, when you are interested in what they're bringing, you're interested in what they're saying, you're truly listening to them, that helps so much. It's just really amazing when people feel heard and respected. They are much more willing to open up to you and collaborate with you. And I think that it's seeing it in terms of collaboration, a conversation that's happening to solve a problem. These kinds of attitudes are really helpful in terms of gaining trust. There's also an element of you need to be trustworthy in your communications. You need to be consistent. You need to be responsive. You need to show up for them and know how to support them in ways that are meaningful to them. But I find that those elements are absolutely crucial. The other thing that helps me in terms of standing on a podium and working with an orchestra it is not a terribly collaborative situation in that I'm on the box, I'm doing the majority of the speaking. We are in a situation where we never have enough rehearsal time, where I can't open it out and say, what do you think we should do with this phrase? Should we shape it this way or that way? Or, take, or this articulation or that? I have to call the shots. I have to get up there and say, this is the general idea. This is the kind of thing I would like to, gain out of this piece. But then it's knowing that my string leaders, the leaders of each section in my strings, are the leaders who have expertise. I might consult the concert master, that's the leader of the first violin section and basically the leader of the string section as well. I might consult them about a bowing change, whether they're up or down, or where to be in the bow that might transform the sound. And what I do is I don't just tell them, I want this. I will ask them how best to create this kind of sound that I have in my mind. And I do that even though I'm a string player, because I respect the fact that they are playing a violin a whole lot more often than I am at this point. So I draw on their expertise and I ask their permission to make a change. Do you feel like this would be a good idea? I do things like that. So again, it's attitude and how you present, even when you're in a situation where you do need to lead with a lot of structure, and the collaboration comes in bits and pieces around that structure, and an orchestral rehearsal works that way. The other thing is that if you know how your team members operate, the woodwinds and the brass and the percussion, they work much more as individuals, where the string sections work as teams. So in the first violin section, I have 16 players that are all playing exactly the same thing. In the oboes, I have 2 individuals and they each have their very own part. So and that's the same with the clarinets and the flutes and the bassoons, and then all of the brass. They're the only one on stage potential to have more autonomy than a violin section might have, or a cello section. So it's, when there is room to give them creative freedom, you do that. And I think that goes a long way in terms of generating self-esteem and trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we need to treat people respect them and treat them as leaders and ask them for advice. I think that, yes, it is a very important lesson. But also there are moments when the leader knows what to do and how to do it, and leader needs to have a certain vision. So how can you project your vision? And I remember that you talked about it during the leadership workshop that I attended. So what would you recommend to the leaders, to team leaders? How can they actually project their vision so that team understands where we are going?
So you asked about vision and projecting vision. Vision is a tricky thing. I feel like in a way it's trickier now than ever, because I think every kind of leader has to make sure that they are approaching vision in a way that is inclusive of voices around them. I think that in general, the best visions do come from a collective process. Now, in terms of as a leader of an institution, certainly when I am in a situation of a rehearsal, we don't have much time, I have to come up there with a musical idea and communicate it, and then work with them to make that vision come to life. What works the most for me is to communicate the essence of the direction with passion. So when you are in a situation, whether it's communicating a vision or anything, where you need to galvanize people to come with you, to work with you, to make something happen, the most persuasive thing that works for me is when somebody is speaking from their heart, when they are attaching what they're saying not to you should, you must, I want, but this project, this music needs this because If we do it this way, it will levitate, it will breathe, it will come to life in a three-dimensional way. If they know the why and they know the power of the why, that is, I think, what motivates people more than anything else. And it's certainly much more powerful than me just saying, I want it this way. I know that every musician sitting in front of me is there because they deeply, deeply love music. They may not all deeply love conductors. They may not deeply love or believe in me as a conductor. Who knows? Whenever you have a group of people in front of you, you have every kind of opinion. However, they all love music and they all believe in the possibility of this music to transform hearts. And so if I focus on that, if I focus on how much this music can mean if we do this with it, that I find musicians are always willing to get behind.
Yeah, this is, it reminds me of what Dale Carnegie wrote in his book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, that you should appeal to nobler motives, that to speak about something that motivates them, not necessarily that is important for you, but what is important for them. And this is exactly what you're saying. So we need to explain the why and how they will benefit from it and how the project will benefit from it. Definitely it can be helpful.
Yes, I think in terms of nobler motives, that's beautifully put. There is an underpinning to why I do what I do. And though it's not something that I articulate very often, and I certainly don't stand on the podium and say this very frequently, but the reason I make music with orchestras is because I believe in the power of people being present with each other and being completely open and receptive to each other. Because I think amazing, miraculous things can happen when people come together in a community and they listen to each other, they uplift each other, and they work together to create beauty. When you think about what's happening in an orchestra, it is exactly that. We sit on stage together. We are intently listening to all the other puzzle pieces and how they fit in with my piece. And I may, at one moment, be a violinist who has the melody. And so I have to play a little bit louder. I have to really shine in that melody. And everybody around me is supporting me and accompanying me in a way that makes that melody sound even better. And then suddenly I am no longer the melodic voice and it's the principal oboe. And so that oboe, then the sound is really the focal point. And I know that I have to play a little softer and listen to them very, very carefully in order to support them. And if they take an extra, just a hair of a moment to breathe or to stretch a certain note to make it extra beautiful, I'm going to catch them and land perfectly with them. I'm going to breathe with them. That's the kind of attention that is extraordinary and that I think brings out the best in humanity. When we do that in front of an audience and invite the audience to be part of that process, it is their attention that allows us to do things on stage in a concert we have never done in a rehearsal. And the number of times that magic happens is so incredible. There's no doubt that a dress rehearsal, when you run things through for the last time, is completely different than what happens in a concert. And that is because of the attention of the people behind you in the hall and your desire to share with them what you love so much enables you as a performing group to perform in a way you never have and to sort of access a level of skill and attention that maybe you didn't even know you had. So these are the underpinnings of why I do what I do. And I think that knowing that in myself, knowing that is always what I seek every time I perform, then I am always in touch with purpose if I remind myself of that. I am always in touch with the greater why that propels me, and that propels my passion, and that propels me to exude that and invite. And it's really about inviting the people around me, both in the orchestra and in the hall, to be present, to witness, to explore the beauty of these pieces written by geniuses and witness the miracle of collective attention.
Yes, it is beautiful. So it is very important to be connected with our own why as well, to be able to project it to our teams and to people we work with. So Laura, to sum up our interview, what would you recommend to people who are listening to us in terms of their leadership and communication? What were the main lessons for you, and what would you encourage our listeners to do to become better leaders?
I think that, the first thing is knowing that underpinning why. How is what you want to do going to make the world better, going to make somebody's life a little bit easier, going to create something that doesn't yet exist, but is going to be helpful or bring delight or, just contribute to people in your community and to the world at large around you. I think that if you know that, and if you know why your task is necessary, then a lot of communicating it, a lot of the motivation to make something happen, a lot of that falls into place. And then the second thing I would just recommend is to be humbled and grateful for the people around you that help you do what you do and that mentor you, but also give you brilliant ideas and help you actually bring things to life. And I think, again, that receptiveness to your team and the respect that you have for the people around you is crucial in enabling them to give you their very best.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for those messages. I'm sure that it will be very inspiring for our listeners. So if our listeners want to know more about you, maybe to reach out, to ask you additional questions, where they can find you in the internet?
Sure. So they can certainly find me at laurajackson.net. They can find my home orchestra, renophil.com. And all the fun things that I do in Reno. The laurajackson.net has the guest conducting that I do in addition to my work in Reno. And if you are in the Nevada area, and we have lots of wonderful things coming up, Pops concerts this summer, and then lots of classical and educational and fun movie concerts next year. We do a lot of different things for different people. So all great things to delight everyone.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Laura, for this interview. Thank you for being an Ideas and Leaders podcast.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It was really a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for listening to Ideas and Leaders podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Let me know that you listened by tagging me in your LinkedIn profile and using a hashtag Ideas and Leaders. See you in the next episode.